Thank you very much for taking time for us.
Sure.
Here.
Honored to be here.
Thank you. I want to ask you about your relationship with President Trump. So, do you keep daily contact or frequent contact with President Trump even now?
Not daily contact, but we keep in touch with each other. We talk every couple of days. I haven't talked to him since his Asian trip, since he started, but before then we talk every couple of days. So have a very good relationship with President Trump. He's somebody I greatly admire and had the great opportunity to work very closely with, both on the campaign and then at the White House. So I greatly admire him and try to stay as close to him as possible.
So please, could you disclose some topics or advices you gave him?
Well, I don't like to, go into what we talk about, but when President Trump calls, he's normally talking about the issues that are on his mind, political issues, other things related to either things he's seen on TV or things he's read in the newspaper, or maybe some of the discussions he's having in the Oval Office. So President Trump is a very, when he discusses, he goes by what I call the Socratic method. He's not a person who's going to read, a 100-page report, but what he'll do is read the précis of that and then ask a lot of questions, or he'll always ask people questions. So he'll go throughout and different advisors, people that are friends of his, people he's known throughout his life, and ask them other questions. So he's constantly asking questions and constantly inquiring of people. And so I consider myself to be very fortunate, very lucky to be in that group.
Could you discuss some typical topics or the discussion? Can you discuss some?
Well, I don't, like I said, I don't like to give the details of private conversations with him, but he's very attuned to what's happening politically in the United States, right? He's always asking questions about that. If he has a policy that's on his mind, whether it's health care or taxes, he'll normally, ask some of his current advisors and former advisors. He'll make sure that he bounces those ideas off you. So it's really politics and policy. If there are things that he's thinking about on the international scene, he'll bounce those ideas off you too. But many of the people that work for President Trump in the campaign, some of the senior guys like Corey Lewandowski or Dave Bossie or people like that, or people like Tom Barrack, who is a very close friend of his. He'll talk to those people on a pretty continual basis.
And President Trump come to Japan, and how do you evaluate his trip to Japan?
When I was at the White House, when he had the summit with Prime Minister Abe at White House, and they went down to play golf in Mar-a-Lago, he is very personally close, I think, to Abe. He considers him a colleague and I think a friend. So they had a very good relationship, and they bonded also on the golf course when they played the United States. I think he did the same thing here. He really thinks, I think, very highly of Abe as a thinker and also a man of action. So, when I've been with the president at the Mar-a-Lago summit, as you remember, we had the Korean situation that weekend, and actually had a live broadcast from Mar-a-Lago late Saturday night. I think it was early Sunday morning. A lot went on. President Trump just thinks very highly of him.
And when you were in office, how did President Trump describe the Prime Minister Abe?
As a very thoughtful man, someone who really had his best country's interests at heart. Someone who was very reflective. I think someone who was very open and frank with President Trump. And so he thought the Prime Minister he had a very special relationship with him. Remember, I believe Abe flew over the first couple of days after the election, right, to the residence in Trump Tower, which was number one. Then we had the whole come to Washington and then go to Mar-a-Lago, right, which was number two, and then come here. So I think he's seen him more than any other world leader. And I think they have a very special bond.
And regarding the United States Asian strategy, what does Japan mean?
Well, I think Japan's the linchpin of it, right? America's really I believe I would say it's the oldest and deepest ally we have in the Pacific. You've noticed the terminology has changed over the last several months. It's now called the Indo-Pacific as far as the strategy that is being laid out, which is really a maritime strategy of the great maritime powers of the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. Kind of a, I don't want to call it containment, but kind of a ring around the Asian land power of China. Japan's central to that. Also, Japan is a democracy. Also, Japan went some very tough times in the 30s and the 1940s in the build-up to World War II and actually World War II. So I think they understand a lot of what's going on in China today. So I think it's, I think President Trump's personal relationship with Prime Minister Abe is quite close. And I also think that the United States considers Japan their central ally in the Pacific.
But in the campaign, the President Trump a little bit hardliner for Japan, especially in trade issues, trade imbalances. So did he change his attitude to Japan?
I don't think it's a change. This is, remember, the whole concept that we have here, the difference between America first and the way things have been going, you have this thing called the construct, or the concept is the post-war rules-based international order. And that's if you go all the way from Western Europe, around the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, through the Straits of Malacca, South China Sea, all the way up to Japan and Northwest Pacific. That whole kind of ring around the Asian landmass is really a construct of the United States and its allies after World War II, with international organizations. And so you have an inextricably linked set of commercial relationships, trade deals, capital markets, underwritten really by an American security guarantee, whether that's the United States Navy or the Army or the Air Force. People are questioning, I think, today, can America actually continue to sustain that overall commitment by itself, or do its allies have to pitch in more? The central thing I think that President Trump brings up, that no other leader in the country has really kind of seen how inextricably linked they are, is these trade relationships with the security guarantee. And it's not that he's any more hardliner. What he said on the campaign is still essentially what he's saying today. And it's not singling out South Korea or Japan or others for unfair treatment. It's just saying, hey, we have to be in a trading relationship that is reciprocal. That's the term he keeps using, reciprocal. And in that reciprocal trade relationship, it will somehow have a balance so that we don't always run, current account deficits, which is really translated to America losing a lot of manufacturing jobs, or a lot of what is, productivity, or actually making things. And so what President Trump, I believe, is saying, and what the America First concept is, it's not America being isolationist. It's really America being in a direct partnership. And that's why I think there's this move against having these big overall, multilateral deals like TPP. What I think the president argued, and what I believe the American people supported him in the campaign, and one of the reasons they voted him into office, was what they would rather have is a strong bilateral relationship, in this case with China, where you have a reciprocal trade deal that makes sense and kind of balances out, and then you have a very strong military alliance of which both parties understand what their commitments are to that alliance and go forward. And I believe that that's what, for the United States over the long haul, it's going to really balance out our deficit issues and things like that. So I think it's not to single out Japan, and it's not that he's any more hardliner in the campaign than he is today. I think it's just this kind of understanding that we have to put all these relationships in balance.
Regarding TPP, and do you believe United States no longer come back to TPP?
I think, Breitbart, the news site I ran, was one of the news sites that were really against TPP. And since the United States pulled out of it, and we did it when I was in the White House, I don't believe, as the original TPP deal was structured, that the United States would be a participant in that. What the U.S. doesn't want to do is get into any more relationships, whether it's the Paris Accord or TPP, where you're one of dozens of participants and you're kind of held by the rules of the smallest participant. What I think people in the United States would rather have is real clarity. These other deals are kind of very muddled. You don't really know what you're getting into. The ramifications of those are only known years later. I think people are very concerned about what I call the unintended consequences of deals like that. So what it would rather be is something that's very highlighted, people understand it, and so that would be a set of bilateral deals with Japan, a bilateral deal with South Korea, with Vietnam, with Singapore, with other countries in the region. So you had, a much stronger bilateral relationship. And then if those parties want to get together and do something, whether militarily or otherwise, it's up to those countries to participate or not participate. But I wouldn't believe that the United States would get into TPP on its old terms. Maybe some reconstructed terms. You never know what could happen, but I don't anticipate that. What I do anticipate is a much more focus on a strong bilateral trade deal with Japan and with South Korea.